But, obviously there are people who will be well off, and there will be some people who will be extremely wealthy. But yes. I would suggest, from what I see of ordinary people, if there is such a beast, that most people in that over 65 age group are people who are living, fairly normal sort of lives economically.
Yes, and the stats back that up.
Great lashings of
no.
Bling and that sort of stuff,
More than half of all people over 65 earn less than $25,000 a year, and many rely on the pension alone. Do you think this is a red herring the Mayor's dragging across the inequality?
First of all, as my cover, I'll say my parents are baby boomers.
Yes.
But I think it's absolutely the case that is a wealthy generation. And that saying they're wealthy is not the same as saying that they're rich or that they have high incomes. A lot of New Zealand wealth, in fact, most of it is in people's homes, which is of no use to them when they want to buy a loaf of bread, I know. But we know that generation, which doesn't just keep TV ratings up, which is a high voting population and holds their elected officials far more accountable than most other demographic sectors, has a disproportionate influence on policy making. That comes out a lot in the child poverty debate. So they do shift the needle around these things. They are demanding in the sense that they're quite vociferous, and the squeaky wheel gets the oil.
One of the reasons for that is that, of course, they vote. They're responsible citizenry who vote.
Exactly, and there is an argument too that this particular generation of people, who are the people who were born, after the war, basically, at the tail end of the last war, knew what deprivation was, knew how difficult life was for the people who went before them, and were determined that this wasn't going to happen to them or theirs. And
sure.
They've the old Protestant work ethic, basically.
But it might happen to
saved.
Theirs, which is the problem.
I know,
and so that's why lots of them, the banker mum and dad is financing all this house purchasing, and even the number of earning couples who are still relying on money from their parents who are retired is quite. Has already been measured in New Zealand. It's quite noticeable.
I've got to get to the President of Grey Power, Tom O'Connor, kindly joining us. Hello, Tom.
How are you, Jim?
Very good, thank you. How many rich baby boomers do you know, please, Tom?
Jim, I haven't seen you since you ran across me in Gore all those years ago, and I embarrassed myself then, so I try not to do it now. It actually makes me quite angry to hear an ill-informed generalisation like this coming from anybody, let alone somebody in public office. These guys need to know better than this, and they need to do some research before they start firing those sorts of shots. If you ask Joseph Parker, this is called leading with the chin. And it's a bit stupid to make this comment because there are so many elements to this. You could write a thesis on this. It's a very, very complex issue. Yeah, we know that there are some extraordinarily wealthy people in New Zealand, and most of them are elderly. It's taken them all their lives to get there.
Yeah.
So you're not born wealthy. You work like hell to make yourself wealthy. And if you're lucky, and if you're prudent, and if things fall your way, you end up wealthy. But it's your age is only a very, very small part of that component.
All right, Tom, I'm sorry to shortchange you, but that was eloquently expressed. Tom O'Connor, the Grey Power President. And doesn't every interest group in society want more for their services without wanting to pay more rates? I suppose that's...
Of course they do.
Not everyone. I'm going to say not all of them. Yeah. There are people who
it's human
values-based politics.
John Campbell,
it's human nature.
Have a good weekend, everybody.
All the best.
Here's Checkpoint.
Kia ora everyone. Tonight on Checkpoint, the family of a man who died 15 months after a serious assault call on the government to repeal a section of the Crimes Act, which means the charges can't be laid 1 year and 1 day or longer after the incident. The Police Commissioner Mike Bush on his drink driving conviction. When was the last time you swam in a river? We send reporters to Waikato, Canterbury and Lower Hutt to find out, and we talked to the Parliamentary Commissioner for the Environment about what she thinks of Nick Smith's announcement yesterday. Taranaki's largest tertiary education provider gets a fail mark, and a Christchurch woman who survived the earthquakes and everything that's happened in the city has simply had a gutsful now of Wilson parking. Do join us after the news and Katrina.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, good afternoon. Ko Katrina Batten tēnei. The Auckland Council wants a man whose bull mastiff viciously mauled his 4-year-old son's face to go to jail. Orlando Shepherd appeared in the Manukau District Court today, where he was due to be sentenced, but his duty lawyer told the judge he had recently been granted legal aid for a new lawyer. Edward Gay has been in court.
Judge Frances Evers postponed the sentencing until next week so Shepherd can talk to his lawyer. She said the matter had dragged on. The council's prosecutor, Richard Marchant, said the council will be seeking a prison sentence starting at 18 months. He urged that sentencing go ahead next week because the case is almost 3 years old, with Shepherd delaying it on purpose. Shepherd's pleaded guilty to owning a dog causing serious injury after the attack at the Otahuhu home in 2014 left his son with serious head injuries. The dog was euthanized a week later. Atu i te kōtia rohi o Manukau, ko Edward Gay aho.
The High Court has been asked to make a declaration that a war pension for a veteran of the Malayan conflict should be backdated possibly to the 1960s. Pat Edwards says a cobra spat venom in his face while he was on patrol, which led to a progressive deterioration in his eyesight. In 2006, he had a partial win, with Veterans Affairs accepting his military service aggravated his loss of sight and backdating his pension to 2004. His lawyer, Jenny Marie Trotman, told the High Court in Wellington today her client's eye problems were initially misdiagnosed as arising from syphilis, but he had never had that disease.
This is a man who's fought for his country, who went into the army with good eyesight. The evidence on the medical records is that he suffered injuries to his eyes. He came out and then he's labelled as having syphilis when there's no evidence to that.
Jenny Marie Trotman said handwriting on a medical form relating to the syphilis diagnosis was not her client's. Donald Trump's chief strategist says the president is maniacally focused on pursuing his agenda. Steve Bannon, who's widely considered to be the power behind the Trump administration, has made a rare public appearance at a Conservative conference. The ABC's Connor Duffy was there.
Steve Bannon is Mr. Trump's chief strategist in the White House. Before working for the president, he served in the Navy, worked as a banker, a filmmaker, and was a founding member of the far-right news site Breitbart. Today, he spoke to cheering activists at the annual Conservative Political Action Conference. He attacked the media, saying they are still underestimating President Trump and his team.
I mean, Trump had those ideas, had that energy, had that vision that could galvanize a team around him.
Mr. Bannon is widely reported to be behind President Trump's executive order banning travellers from a number of Muslim-majority countries as well as refugees.
Connor Duffy in Maryland. Meanwhile, Mr. Trump says he wants to ensure America's nuclear arsenal is at what he calls the top of the pack. In his first comments about nuclear weapons since he took office, he says the US has fallen behind in its nuclear capacity. He says while it would be wonderful for no country to have nuclear weapons, if countries do have them, the US is going to be at the top of the pack. According to the anti-nuclear group Plowshares Fund, Russia has 7,300 warheads, about 300 more than the US. A Taranaki business lobby says a damning report on the province's largest tertiary education provider is terrible news for the region. In its review of the Western Institute of Technology, the Qualifications Authority says it's lost confidence in the quality of education at the Polytech and its internal quality assurance processes. It downgraded the institute from a Category 1 provider to Category 3, making it the lowest-ranked public tertiary provider in the Polytech sector. The chief executive of the Taranaki Chamber of Commerce, Richard Williams, says it's time the institute got its act together.
I'm very disappointed to hear that after all this time that WITA still seems to struggle to be recognised as the institution that our province really needs.
Richard Williams says he's confident the Polytech's new board will right the ship. In 2012, the institute had just over 2,000 full-time equivalent students. By 2015, that had dropped to 1,734. The institute blames the Qualifications Authority's findings on fallout from its failed Māori Performing Arts program. The police in Malaysia say a nerve agent on a United Nations list of weapons of mass destruction was used to kill the estranged half-brother of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. Kim Jong-nam was poisoned at Kuala Lumpur airport last week when 2 women wiped a toxin on his face. The police say the chemical has been identified as the nerve agent VX, which is a highly toxic substance used for chemical warfare. It's 5 past 5. To sport, the Highlanders open their Super Rugby campaign against the Chiefs in Dunedin tonight, and coach Tony Brown says they're keen to continue their winning run. The Highlanders have emerged as the Chiefs' bogey team in the past few seasons. They're unbeaten in their past 6 clashes, dating back to 2014. Brown hopes that trend continues.
We definitely have had the wood on the Chiefs for the last few years, and like I say, the boys enjoy playing against them, and I don't know why we've been successful against them in the past. It's just one of those things around rugby, so hopefully we continue that role and get a little bit of luck and things go our way.
Tony Brown. The match kicks off at 7:35. The Wellington Phoenix coach Des Buckingham says the 3 players suspended from tomorrow's A-League football clash in Brisbane breached team standards but did nothing illegal. Midfielder Rolly Benavaccia and defenders Tom Doyle and Ryan Lowry have all been stood down. However, the club won't say what they've done. The Phoenix were thrashed 5-1 by the Melbourne City last weekend, and the incident occurred in the wake of that loss. Buckingham says the trio have let themselves, the club and fans down.
We spoke after the game about needing players that were going to dig in and help us get seven important games to the season back on track. The lack of professionalism from the 3 of them after what was a very disappointing result is the reason that the 3 of them will miss out this weekend.
Des Buckingham. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, we've got a mixtape of summer favourites selected by my colleagues at Music 101. Country Life meets a Scottish vet on her OE in New Zealand. She's not missing the geese. We preview the Royal New Zealand Air Force's 75th birthday show at Ohakia. More flying machines than you can shake a joystick at. And we are dedicating this week's Sonic Tonic to the songs and sound bites of the backcountry. So go bush on Nights with me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Met Service weather through to midnight tomorrow. Northland and Auckland long fine spells, isolated showers until tonight and again tomorrow afternoon, mainly in Northland. Waikato to Wellington, also Coromandel, Bay of Plenty in the central high country, fine apart from a few areas of cloud morning and evening. Gisborne and to Wairarapa, also Buller, Nelson and Marlborough, fine apart from cloudy periods about Buller from tonight. Canterbury and Otago, sunny today apart from isolated afternoon showers inland. Scattered rain developing, spreading north tomorrow afternoon and evening. For Westland and Fiordland, cloudy periods, rain developing in Fiordland in the morning and a few showers about South Westland from tomorrow afternoon. Southland and Clutha, fine today, scattered rain tomorrow, clearing during the afternoon and evening. And the Chatham Islands, mostly cloudy with a few early showers tomorrow. It's 5:08 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thank you very much indeed, Katrina. Coming up on Checkpoint, the Parliamentary Commissioner for the Environment on Nick Smith's water targets and the intensification of farming. Really interesting interview coming up. The Police Commissioner on his 1983 drink driving conviction, and our reporter Ian Telfer is on the Auckland Islands. But first, the family of a man seriously assaulted in 2015 who died at the beginning of this year are calling on the government to repeal or amend Section 162 of the Crimes Act, which says, and I quote, "No one is criminally responsible for the killing of another unless the death takes place within a year and a day after the cause of death." Now, George Siossi was punched. King hit is a phrase his family rejects because they say there's nothing kingly about it. In September 2015, the youth worker fell down some stairs and hit his head violently on concrete at the bottom. Emergency surgery saved his life. But despite the best efforts of his doctors, carers, his family and George's own fight for his life, he died at the beginning of this year. Under Section 162 and its 1 year and 1 day provision, no charges could be laid relating to his death. His family says that seems arbitrary and unfair. They believe the law must provide discretion in the case of deaths that follow more than a year and a day on. His mother, Sandra Gray, tells us what happened on the night after George and his assailant had both left a nightclub where they'd had a verbal altercation.
George was going to Denny's to celebrate a birthday party with friends, and he was followed. He was deliberately followed.
And his assailant walked up to him and without any warning, without any sense that George knew it was coming, he just hit him really hard.
Yes, more than once. And it wasn't just him. He had friends with him. So, you know, is that being a king? No, he took his friends with him as well.
And George's assailant, and this is very important, the facts aren't in dispute. George's assailant pleaded guilty, didn't he, to wounding with intent?
Yes.
He was convicted of it. He was ordered to serve 12 months home detention, which is the maximum sentence for wounding with intent, 300 hours community work, and he was ordered to pay a form of reparation of $1,000.
Yes.
So it's not in dispute that these are the facts and this occurred and that the assailant was guilty of a criminal act.
Yes.
But it's what happened next that is so upsetting for the family, because George survived for a period and then terribly he died, right?
Yeah, he did. He more than survived. He struggled. He fought all the time to stay with us. He fought for himself, for his friends, for his family, everyone. But his body just wore out.
When you say he fought, what did he do?
He went on a journey, and a really emotional journey. Every emotion that, that we know, he went through it. He went through sadness, despair, his whole aim and what he was doing, what he was fighting for, was to come home.
And to get better, right? Because he had a stroke.
To get better and come home.
So he needed a whole lot of rehabilitation. He effectively needed to learn how to be himself again, didn't he? He needed to learn how to walk and talk and all of that. And he worked terribly hard at that, didn't he?
He did. He did really hard. We were so proud of him. So proud of him. He fought all the way.
And then what happened? Just quite out of the blue, did you have any sense that George was going to die?
Not at all. And initially, at all the points that he went into hospital, because he was in and out of hospital, it concerned me. I thought, am I going to lose my boy? And no, I didn't have those times. But I thought he was fighting so hard for himself to live that he would achieve it. Because even in the life before, he was a fighter, for what he believed in, everything, in every way. So I thought he'd succeed this fight.
So when did you lose George?
On the 4th of January.
And the assault was in September 2015.
That's right.
And under section 162 of the Crimes Act, after what period can you not be charged with causing someone's death?
1 year and 1 day.
So if George had died within 1 year and 1 day, his assailant would have been charged with some crime that involved causing George's death, potentially even manslaughter.
Yes, I believe so. I hope so.
But because 1 year and 1 day had elapsed, there was nothing.
Yeah, and it's a total insult to my son, for those before him in the same situation. It's an insult.
Did anyone call to explain this to you? Did anyone call to explain that Boya couldn't be charged?
No. That was the first thing I thought of after George's burial. So what happens now? Does he go back to court and under a different charge? And I was told no, because there's a rule of 1 year and 1 day. I'd never heard of it before. Nobody had told me before that.
And who told you?
Melissa did.
And who's Melissa?
She's George's fiancée.
Right. So George's fiancée had to tell you that George's assailant was not going to be charged with anything further, despite the fact George had died.
That's right.
Where is George's assailant now? Where is Boya now?
I wouldn't have a clue. I don't know. Actually, during George's time, I've deliberately chosen not to let him occupy my mind. I never went to the court cases. I never looked at the newspaper, because to me he wasn't worth taking up space in my mind. And the time that he was in court, I'd rather be with my son.
What would you like to see happen as George's mum? What is the one thing you would like to see changed?
The 1 year, 1 day will thrown out, preferably. If not amended, thrown out. I'm here to speak on my son's behalf. It's one of the last things I can do for him, and I need to do it. I need to speak for him. Not only him, but mainly him, but the people before and the people yet to come, the families, the victims. Yeah, that's why I'm here.
That's Sandra Gray, the mother of George Siossi. This afternoon we went to the office of the Minister of Justice, Amy Adams, and the Minister replied, "This isn't an issue that's been raised with me before now. I think it is worth reviewing the way Section 162 of the Crimes Act works. I've asked my justice officials for advice and they will report back to me in due course." So the Minister is seeking advice on this. We'll report back once we hear what officials have told her. 5:16, you're with Checkpoint. Police Commissioner Mike Bush, the country's top cop, says he makes no excuses for an historical drink driving conviction. It happened 34 years ago, his bosses knew, and he survived as a police officer at the time. He today received the backing of Police Minister Paula Bennett. Now, the offence happened, as we said, in 1983. In 1991, police policy changed effectively to one strike and you're out. Under the Clean Slate Act, historic convictions are automatically concealed if you've had no other convictions within the last 7 years, you've never been given a custodial sentence, and you've fully paid any fines or other costs. That applied to Mike Bush, but he waived his right to privacy after questions from Fairfax's Stuff Circuit team. Earlier this afternoon, he told me what exactly he'd done.
I was convicted of driving with excess blood alcohol back in... The incident occurred in 1983 in Auckland.
You were
and I pled guilty several months later.
Right, you were 23 years old at the time?
I was.
How long have you been in the police force for at that stage?
At that stage, I'd been a police officer for 5 years, and I was in my training as a detective.
Okay. You received what? What were $250 fine and disqualification?
Yes, it was the standard $250 fine and 6 months disqualification.
Right. Post-1991, when another Commissioner of Police said, drink driving and you're out, would you have survived in the police force?
I would not have after 1991. Back in 1983, expectations were different. Obviously, I reported this to my supervisors, superiors straight away. The matter was acknowledged and dealt with, and I've been reflecting on it ever since, but it did not impact on my career. Back in the day, there was a different attitude to drink driving. I think where it is now is exactly the right place. We have high expectations and about our staff and about every member of the public, because as I reflect on what I did, I knew what I'd done wrong. But the more I reflect, the thing that concerns me is that I did something dangerous. So, it wasn't a good thing then, it was wrong, and it's wrong now. And, I congratulate police and all of the partners that work in this space to have moved that culture, because, it's a dangerous thing, and I advise anyone not to drink and drive.
Okay, so you uphold the post-1991 regime, which is that for an identical offence now, you would almost certainly lose your career as a police officer.
Yeah, John, I have a personal view. The view that was taken by the Commissioner of the day and by executive leaders is a very objective view. You could consider mine quite subjective because I have a different experience. But I have a personal view, but I also acknowledge and support the organisational view.
And the organisational view is you're out?
That's right.
Your personal view is?
My personal view, and this is a difficult thing to talk to because I'm very supportive of the organisational view and the culture shift that's been made. But as I reflect on myself, I made a really bad mistake, but I learned from it and I've moved on. and it has shaped my thinking in this space.
The issue now, I guess, is, and you were 23 at the time, and it was how many years ago?
34.
Yeah. So 34 years ago, and you were 23 years old, but the issue now is there is a slight sense of do as I say, not as I did, right?
Yes, and that's a very, very fair comment, John, but all I can say is it was a very long time ago. It was a different time. There were different attitudes, but that doesn't make it right. It was still the wrong thing to do. And again, I can only say that the way I view it is that I made a massive mistake. I learnt from it. And I'm really proud to be the leader of the New Zealand Police. It's a great organisation. And I'm just so fortunate that I continued to have that opportunity.
You got the opportunity to learn from it, right? You're now head of an organisation where a similar situation, the 23-year-old wouldn't get the opportunity to learn from it. And look, boy, you know, there, but for the grace of God, go almost everyone in this country over the age of 50, I suspect, because the culture has changed so much. But is this confusing now to have a commissioner of police who has a drink driving offence and who is the head of an organisation in which people who do the same thing now would be out?
Yes, and I completely understand that view. I don't have the perfect answer to that, John, other than to say it is a different time now. My personal view is that, you know, we should look at these things case by case, but that's just a personal, subjective view.
Mike Bush, the Police Commissioner, that offence from 1983. We'd love your opinion on this. Text us 2101, email checkpoint@radionz.co.nz. Or we are, of course, on Twitter and Facebook. It's 22 minutes past 5. Yesterday, Nick Smith announced a target of 90% of rivers and lakes being, and I quote, swimmable by the year 2040. Heads were scratched about what exactly the targets meant and whether the goalposts had been shifted. And opinions were polarised. Generally speaking, farming groups welcomed the targets, while scientists and environmental groups were confused or disappointed by them. Appointed as an independent watchdog for the environment, charged with maintaining or improving its quality, Dr. Jan Wright is the Parliamentary Commissioner for the Environment. What does she think of what Nick Smith announced yesterday? Well, we asked her.
I think there's some good things in it. This document is largely a reaction to the public outcry about wadeability being a standard for fresh water, if you recall. So, and people really said, wadeable is not good enough, we want to be able to swim. And so they have moved to a focus on swimmability. And the government has taken on the message that people want to go down to a river on a hot day and jump in. Another thing they've done in it, they've got a maps with a colour scheme that grades rivers in swimmability from blue to red, where blue is excellent and red is very bad. And they've published all of those, and that's sort of very transparent, and that's going to upset some of the councils. So that's going to be an interesting thing to watch. And another thing they've done is there's certainly plans there for a lot more fencing, which will keep stock out of rivers, and some work on town sewage. I'd like to see a lot of planting inside those fences, between the fences and the river, because that would keep more of that fecal matter out. But on the bad side, it's very confusing. There have been some goalposts moved or some ways of measuring things moved, and it's very difficult to tell whether things are being tightened or loosened, and that's a big concern of mine. But I guess the thing that bothers me the most, and bear in mind I've had very little time to actually read this document, is that they're looking at all water and all these rivers and all these lakes across the country. And in many of those rivers and lakes, or parts of them, people don't want to go and swim. And they never do, or very seldom. So really, why would you worry about swimmability where it's excellent because it's high in a catchment and really cold? So, you know, when I grew up in Christchurch, Coes Ford in the Selwyn River was a place to go and swim in a river, and it was lovely. It's not now. And that's what we're worrying about. I would not be inclined to go and swim in a river up at Arthur's Pass, where it would be lovely and pristine, but it's just too cold. So when you come to think about swimmability, and it's where do people want to swim and what time of the year? And so there's another water image, there's sort of a dilution that's gone on by putting the whole length of these rivers and the whole area of these lakes.
Right. So
worries.
when the government says 90%, that includes national parks, that includes way up in the high country where no one ever goes, and that includes a whole lot of places where ice melts, where no one ever swims. So in fact, the 10% is disproportionately likely to be down by the coast and where the people are.
Well, you can see that as soon as you look on the maps. And so, there's good information in this document on the website. And you can see red, orange, yellow around the coast, places like Northland, Auckland, Taranaki, quite a bit in Southland. So, and in many of those cases where you get those other colours, it's where people do live and where they do want to swim. So we've known this for a long time. Basically, the lower you get down in a developed catchment, the closer you get to the sea, generally, the worse things get, because it's just the way.
Do we try hard enough in this country, or does this still look like smoke and mirrors and lip service?
There's some trying hard going on. There's a lot of changes. You'll see a lot more planting alongside streams and rivers. We've got some work to do upgrading sewage from some of the towns. We can do more, and we need to do more. And I would like to see, when the milk price was high, I would have liked to see a lot of action there when the farmers were wealthy, and it's harder to make them do things when they're not. So this comes and goes a bit. But there's a lot of planting going on. There is fencing going on. If we keep the stock out, it helps. But as long as we don't add too many more, that's when it's going to go backwards.
Right, that's a very good point, and I want to end with that. What you're saying is we have to define a limit on intensification. We have to say at some stage, enough, no more, because of the water.
Well, at some stage, if we want the water to be clean, we're going to have to make those decisions. Yeah, and it's really beyond that point, I think, in parts of the country, say the Waikato, maybe parts of Southland. But I don't know whether there's an inclination to go, or how strong that inclination is to go on adding more and more now anyway, because I think some people have been realising that you can overinvest here.
Parliamentary Commissioner for the Environment, Dr. Jan Wright, would love to know your feedback about the quality, your opinion on the quality of water in New Zealand rivers and lakes. You can text us 2101, you can email us Facebook, or we're on Twitter, of course. The email address is checkpoint@radionz.co.nz. The feedback on Mike Bush is utterly one-sided, and it is summarised by Stephen Hansen, who says, so far back, who cares? And that is overwhelmingly your opinion on the police commissioner's drink driving conviction from 1983 revealed today. We're going to stay on the subject of water at 5:28. We sent reporters to the Waikato, Canterbury and Lower Hutt today to ask people in areas either identified by the minister or actually by poor water standards over the past few days when they last swam in a river. Here's our reporter Zach Fleming.
Around halfway between Auckland and Hamilton, you'll find the Whangamarino River. And at the very end of it, you'll find Shane. He lives less than 100 metres from its banks and has farmed here for 22 years. Shane says he used to use the river, but now it's too dirty.
Last 22 years, I do feel it has deteriorated.
What did it used to be like compared to now?
I started with no water. I used to have to bucket out of the river. I've had to bucket the odd time when a pump has broken down, and I found that when I stepped in that water, the bugs itched my ankles, and I ended up scratching myself raw.
He says his animals now refuse water from the river.
I had a pump breakdown, and my animals, especially horses are very fussy. They didn't touch the water. I would have to look for another suitable option. We used to hear the bullfrogs quite prominent every year. They have got quieter and quieter over the years. My granddad used to say it's a good judge of nature. I'm not sure, but we don't hear them as much.
Do you reckon the river should be cleaner?
Yeah, I would like it cleaner, and then I might go for a swim, or my animals might drink it.
The Whangamarino River regularly has a Coal A readings that are higher than what's considered safe. The water here is brown, but despite that, there are no signs at the water's edge advising people they probably shouldn't swim in it. 20 minutes down the road, we came across a local fisherman who's been living in the area for nearly 20 years. He didn't want to appear on camera, but said he used to jet ski and play water sports on the river without concern. but now he wouldn't. Further south at the bottom of the North Island, it's a similar story. Here's what Environment Minister Nick Smith has to say about the Hutt River.
If you take the Hutt River, over half the time it's less than 100 E. coli. Over half the time the chance is less than 1 in 1,000. There's only a chance of 1 in 20 for the 15% of the time. So the question is, how is it fair to describe the Hutt River? The government describes it as the lowest category of swimmable. That is at a fair level.
But here's what locals think.
No, I probably wouldn't. It's just I'm not sure what the quality is like.
No, at the moment it's lovely. It's been had a good flush out with the floods lately. I'll swim there tomorrow.
I don't think it's clear and clean, but what can you do?
I know there have been algae problems in the past and animals have died, but hopefully things will clean up a little bit so it is safer for not only animals but people to swim in as well.
And further south still, in Christchurch, we asked people when they last swam in a river.
And I live in Selwyn, and Selwyn's been hit really hard with its rivers and waterways. Dairying's had a massive impact, so Coast Ford is unusable now. Typically, no, I'd avoid it. This isn't a new issue. We've been facing this for over a decade now. There's been awareness and conversation within the public space about this, so we've had a long time to do something about it. And then by coming up with the new standards for quality that they're talking about, which even then it's not talking about having clean waterways, they're just sort of coming up with some sort of middle ground. I don't think it's enough.
I know that in general things are deteriorating. My mother actually lives right next to a river and they can't go swimming in it anymore.
Christchurch resident Katrina Peters says she'd like to see government officials visit some of the rivers before giving them a pass mark as being acceptable for swimming.
To say that they're okay to swim in or they're safe, and look at the wee children. Are you going to put small children in those areas because it's safe? It's quite dangerous. It could be dangerous.
So you think a 1 in 20 chance of people getting sick is unacceptable?
Oh, most definitely. Yeah, definitely. Especially if you're supposed to be going in fresh water, yes. I wouldn't like to see anybody sick, as a result of swimming in fresh water.
You can give your opinion on the new water quality measures for the next 2 months. Consultation is open until April the 28th. For Checkpoint, Zach Fleming.
My view.
With Checkpoint on RNZ. Thank you for being with us on a Friday evening. Coming up, Nona with business news. Taranaki's largest tertiary education provider fails its latest report card. What a predator-free New Zealand could look like. We travel to the Auckland Islands to find out. And a Christchurch commuter takes on Wilson parking. She survived the earthquake, she survived the bushfires, but actually she's had enough of Wilson's. That's before 6. Katrina Batten is here with the headlines.
The family of a man seriously assaulted in 2015 who died several weeks ago say it's unfair the man who hit him cannot be charged over his death. No one can be held criminally responsible if a death occurs more than a year and a day on from the offence. George Siosi died last month, 16 months after he was assaulted in Manukau. He never fully recovered. Mr Siosi's mother, Sandra Gray, told John Campbell she wants a law change. The Justice Minister, Amy Adams, says the issue has not been raised with her before. She's asked officials to look into how Section 162 of the Crimes Act is working and report back to her. The Auckland Council wants a man whose bull mastiff viciously mauled his 4-year-old son's face in 2014 to go to jail. The council's prosecutor, Richard Merchant, told the Manukau District Court he'll be seeking a prison sentence starting at 18 months for Orlando Shepherd. Sentencing was delayed until next week. The High Court has been asked to make a declaration that a war pension for a veteran of the Malayan conflict should be backdated, possibly to the 1960s. Pat Edwards said a cobra spat venom in his face while he was on patrol, which led to a progressive deterioration in his eyesight. Donald Trump's chief strategist says the US president is maniacally focused on pursuing his agenda. Steve Bannon is widely considered to be the power behind the Trump administration. Meanwhile, Mr. Trump says he wants to ensure America's nuclear arsenal is at what he calls the top of the pack. In his first comments about nuclear weapons since he took office, he says the United States has fallen behind in its nuclear capacity. The police in Malaysia say a nerve agent on a United Nations list of weapons of mass destruction was used to kill the estranged half-brother of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. Kim Jong-nam was poisoned in Kuala Lumpur airport last week when two women wiped a toxin on his face. Those are the headlines. I'll be back at 6.
Thanks so much, Katrina. Lots of feedback coming in tonight. We'll have some of it shortly, but Nona, let's look at business news. The publishing and media company NZME,
Yeah.
unveiled its annual profit today amid pressure on advertising, and it's awaiting word on its proposed merger with rival Fairfax, right?
That's right. So it's been a difficult period for NZME, and I guess no doubt quite stressful, especially over the last few days. Actually, since yesterday when the Commerce Commission turned down the Sky Vodafone merger. You know, that can't be great news for NZME and Fairfax because most people, well, a lot of people were thinking this Sky merger, if any was going to go ahead, was going to be that one. The NZME and Fairfax has had a cloud hanging over it for a while. The Commerce Commission came out and took an unusual step early on, saying that, that the merger could likely lead to a lack of diversity in news for those two, for the news media.
Of course,
generally.
NZME and Fairfax say, look, if you don't let us merge, we are so up against it that we will have to reduce staff numbers, leading to precisely the same lack of diversity in news.
And, really, speaking with the chief executive of NZME today, Michael Bogues, it was actually quite a good result. Overall, it was flat, but they've done a lot. They've done quite a lot to improve their advertising revenues over the second half of their full year.
So is that the Herald or radio or both?
It's actually the whole lot.
Right.
It's the Herald, it's the ZB stations, it's the
ZM stations.
The ZMs.
Yep.
Grab one, is it? Grab me, grab one, grab me. I'm not sure which. It's all these very cool
it's
names.
A Friday night.
Yeah, that's right. Speaking of websites, one of the things that NZME's chief executive said, I asked him about, paywalls was one of the things that came up through an analyst call. The analysts, by the way, liked the result. They thought that NZME had done a pretty darn good job considering everything. Asked about paywalls, would they put one up? They said no, they would not put one up. That was the chief executive said they wouldn't. What they're looking at actually is putting up a new website based on the same software that's driving the Washington Post website. And we have a little bit of audio from this morning's interview that I did with the chief executive there, Michael Bogues.
The Washington Post, they've got a great technology roadmap. They've already delivered some of it, and they've got some more to continue on with. What it brings us is some great tools for our newsroom to use. It actually has some excellent audience analytics to tell us what people are enjoying and how they're engaging, and then further functionality that will allow us to try and monetize some of that further into the future.
Are you considering putting up any paywalls?
We have no intent on putting a paywall across the entire NZ Herald site or any of our other mastheads around the country. I guess I've consistently said I do think there's an opportunity for us to get better at producing really unique content and planned content, and in some verticals in the future there may well be an opportunity for us to charge for that.
And do you think that that's the way that you're going to be able to grow your business going forward, whether or not the merger goes ahead?
Oh, that's certainly one of the key ways, but there's obviously other digital initiatives. There's our radio business, and then other ways that we can monetize through transactions, like with ratebroker.co.nz, like with our JV with Chinese New Zealand Herald.co.nz, for example, or restauranthub.co.nz, which is a restaurant booking service.
And that's the chief executive of NZME, Michael Bogues. So the share price rose 8%. That's by 69 cents by 5 cents to 69 cents. So that's quite a good improvement. That was probably better than what the market was expecting. Overall, the top 50 index fell 0.4% by 31 points to 7,059. Which is kind of surprising because, the markets coming out of Wall Street were pretty strong, didn't kind of flow through to us. But never mind. The New Zealand dollar also lost a bit of steam this afternoon. 72.2 US cents, 93.5 Australian, 57.5 pence.
Nona,
and that's it.
Nona Feltzer, thanks so much, Nona. Have a great weekend.
And you.
See you Monday. 20.5 to 6 on Checkpoint. They're close neighbours and, of course, share a long border, but things were a little chilly when Mexico hosted two top officials from the Trump administration. No surprise, really. Mexico's vice president expressed worry and irritation about Americans' policies as he met with Secretary of State Rex Tillerson and Homeland Security Secretary John Kelly. There's that wall and also the latest plans by the Trump administration to crack down on immigration and deport illegal immigrants, some of whom have been living in the United States for a very long time, and send a lot of money back to Mexico. The BBC's Will Grant is in Mexico City and has this report.
Trips to Mexico are supposed to be easy for US diplomats. Not at the moment, though. The bilateral relationship, which is normally so warm and friendly, is at its lowest point in decades. Or, as the Mexican foreign minister put it, in a complex moment.
It is a fact that is obvious that Mexicans are worried, irritated before what is perceived as policies that might be harmful to our national interest and to Mexicans in Mexico and abroad.
For their part, the Trump administration's envoys tried to strike a more conciliatory note, given the weeks of bad feeling on both sides.
In our meetings, we jointly acknowledged that in a relationship filled with vibrant colors, two strong sovereign countries from time to time will have differences. We listened closely and carefully to each other as we respectfully and patiently raised our respective concerns.
However, many Mexicans are hearing mixed messages from Washington. The visit was seen as an olive branch, but it came amid growing fears over the deportation of undocumented immigrants to Mexico carried out by the US military, a fear seemingly backed up by President Trump earlier in the day. The Homeland Security Secretary tried to reassure his hosts.
Let me be very, very clear. There will be no mass deportations. Everything we do in DHS will be done legally and according to human rights in the legal justice system of the United States.
Mexico and the US is a symbiotic relationship. In trade terms alone, it's worth $1.5 billion a day, not to mention the long-standing cultural and human ties between the two neighbours. Improved relations are in both governments' interests, and after several highly emotive and politically charged weeks, this trip was an effort to bring them back to solid ground.
That report from the BBC. Let's head home again. Taranaki's largest tertiary education provider has flunked its latest report card from the New Zealand Qualifications Authority. In its review of the Western Institute of Technology, released today, NZQA says it's lost confidence in the quality of education at the Polytech and in its internal quality assurance processes. It's a strong report from NZQA. Our Taranaki reporter Robin Martin has more.
The Qualifications Authority has downgraded the institute from a Category 1 provider to Category 3, making it the lowest rated public tertiary provider in the Polytech sector. The report, covering the 4 years to September last year, acknowledges the institute is in a period of renewal, but it nevertheless identifies numerous problems. They include the Polytech not having an academic director, plummeting Māori success rates, poor data collection and analysis, and evidence of high workloads and stress amongst its teaching staff.
There has been a lack of academic and pedagogical leadership. The Western Institute of Technology has only recently engaged an academic director. It has not had anyone in this position or equivalent for several years.
Course completion rates at the institute declined overall from 83% in 2012 to 70% in 2015. Māori course completions had an even sharper decline, going from 85% to 57% over the same period. The report says the institute effectively has no Māori strategy, and senior management and its council do not appear to be tackling a widening gap between Māori and non-Māori achievement.
There is little evidence of analysis of achievement at the executive or governance level. For example, when the institute did not meet its course completion targets for priority learners in 2015, the analysis of why this occurred and targeted initiatives for improvement were not evident.
The review also suggested the Polytech had dropped an internship from its cookery program to appeal to international students interested in gaining New Zealand residency. The chairman of the Western Institute of Technology's council, Robin Brockie, says it is disappointed by the findings, but they were not unexpected. Mr Brockie blames it on the fallout from the failed Māori Performing Arts program, which resulted in the Polytech having to repay $4 million of government funding.
The disruption caused by the issue around the Māori Performing Arts program, which covered a period prior to and a part of the last review by NZQA, caused major disruption. That's as far as I think all that needs to be said.
Mr Brocky says the Polytech is implementing all 8 of NZQA's recommendations and is confident about the future. It's not a confidence shared by the Chief Executive of the Taranaki Chamber of Commerce, Richard Williamson. Mr Williamson says the downgrade is terrible news for the region.
About time that we actually were able to give some good news out to the business and the wider community that we do have a strong educational establishment there, and I'm sure there's a lot of work going on in the background to do this, but it's just disappointing that yet again there's another poor report.
Outside the institute, Year 13 students from the neighbouring New Plymouth Boys High School found the report's findings off-putting.
Well, if the quality's real low, but then nah, not really, because I want to just get the best that I can.
Mustn't be a very good place to learn if it's getting bad reviews.
If you've completely given up on school, that's your thing.
Probably not too good, but local, so helps. But I'm not thinking of going to it.
The Qualifications Authority will return to the Western Institute of Technology in 15 months' time to re-evaluate its performance. In New Plymouth for Checkpoint, call Robin Martin-Tierney.
14 minutes to 6 from Taranaki, let's head south, a long way south. An official visit to the sub-Antarctic Auckland Islands has been given a glimpse of what a predator-free New Zealand could look like in the future. But there's still work to be done to make these islands, which lie 465 km south of Bluff, pest-free before the mainland can be attempted. Our reporter Ian Telfer was part of the Department of Conservation delegation to the largest of New Zealand's sub-Antarctic islands, and Ian filed this report.
It took 24 hours on a Navy patrol ship, rigorous quarantine searches and the vacuuming of every belonging, even underpants, then jet boats and inflatable Zodiacs to get here. But what a place awaited us at pest-free Enderby Island. In the space of just half an hour we saw sea lions, royal albatrosses, a rare rata forest and then 3 yellow-eyed penguin chicks standing on a boardwalk. The Parliamentary Private Secretary for Conservation, Scott Simpson, stood transfixed.
It's just amazing to see these penguins so close, just sort of looking at us more suspiciously than we're looking at them is fantastic. Oh, and that one's he's just taken a little bit of a tumble off the boardwalk. But such gracious creatures, and to see them just completely relaxed and at home in their natural environment, it's a real privilege, absolute treat.
Scott Simpson says it's the perfect example of why the government last year launched a plan to rid New Zealand of possums, rats and stoats by 2050.
Well, it just makes me think about how important it is that if we possibly can to restore as much of the natural heritage of New Zealand back to its original state. That's why that Predator 2050 stuff is so important, because this is a living, breathing example of what it could be like.
And this became a theme of the trip. On a hilltop in winds that were so strong we could hardly stand up, the Minister, Maggie Barry, who hosted a TV gardening show for years, was in her element among the mega-herbs.
Magnificent. We can only imagine how gorgeous the bulbinellas would have been about 6 weeks ago, but they have died back. And you can see the leaves are dying back here, but effectively they keep as much photosynthesising going as possible to then...
The plants and animals here are all thriving despite an inhospitable climate. There've never been any rats, stoats or possums, and all the cattle and rabbits that were brought here have been removed. Though there is some introduced grass which Ms Barry would like dealt to.
This is what Predator Free is all about, to be able to see a future where the predators are not making an impact and are allowing our nature to regenerate in a way that returns it to what it ought to be. So this is, for me, the vision of what we can achieve.
There's a long way to go. Getting rid of the worst pests from the mainland islands of New Zealand has been likened to putting the first man on the moon. But each time Doc clears an island, it hones its skill. Just 1 kilometre away on the much larger Auckland Island, there are 3 pests ripping up the forests and taking out the birds. Doc's Southern South Island manager, Alan Munn, says plans are being drawn up for them too.
Well, if we can't make places like this predator-free, the rest of New Zealand's going to be extremely difficult. So we've made a great start in the sub-Antarctic islands, and we've really only got the main Auckland Island to remove the pests and predators from. And that's the next thing to be doing, really.
When do you think that might get onto that?
Well, we're planning for it now, but, well, it'd be nice to think we'd be actually doing some work in 18 months ago or so.
And that's the pigs, is it?
Yeah, pigs and the cats. There's cats here too in very low numbers. But it'd be good to get both things at the same time. There's also mice on this main Auckland island. But at this stage of it, that may be a step too far.
Maggie Barry says the trip's shown her these subantarctic islands could take more tourists, and they should pay more for the upkeep. Private companies who take tourists to the islands need to have a concession and pay $400 for an entry permit. A price that gives a lucky few a glimpse of what a predator-free New Zealand could one day look like. In the Auckland Islands, for Checkpoint, Ian Telfer.
Thanks, Ian. If you're watching, those beautiful pictures were also shot by Ian too. It's 5:09 to 6 on a Friday night at the end of a pretty big old week. Sometimes the straw that breaks the camel's back might weigh as little as a parking slip. In Christchurch, Pam Sharp, like most people who've remained in the city, has endured, strong in the belief that it was worth staying, no matter what, tectonic plates, bushfires, insurance companies and any number of post-earthquake acronyms could throw at them. But then she got a parking fine from Wilson Parking, and she tried to contact Wilson Parking to dispute it, and then she talked about it with her son, Johnny Moore, a columnist with the Press in Christchurch, well known in the city, and he wrote it up, and it seems to have opened the floodgates for other camels and other backs in the city. So here, because having a good vent is good for your mental health, is Pam Sharp just before 3 o'clock this afternoon, and the story of her parking ticket.
I did pay for my park, I did. And then when I came back to the park, it was a very windy day, and so, maybe when I shut the door or something, the ticket had flipped over, and so, or it was scrunched up, and so, they gave me a ticket, fair enough, I was in their park. And
they couldn't see your ticket?
They could see the ticket, but they couldn't see the writing on it, which was fair enough, so they gave me a ticket. And so I saw the man who was handing out the tickets, and I said to him, look, this is my ticket, and it's got the date on it, and that I've paid for it and all the rest. And he said, oh, well, I can't do anything. You need to write to the people on the back. So you write into this number, and you do it online. And so I got my daughter to do it. She's of that generation who's always on her phone and does everything on her phone, pays the bills and all the rest of it. So she knew what she was doing. So she took a photo, sent it all as that asked, and then I never heard back. I thought, oh, that's good. And then I got a letter saying, oh, you haven't paid. If you don't pay within, so many days, then you will, it will go up to $85. And so I tried to ring them, and you can only ring, between 10 and 3, and I had a hell of a job getting through. And finally I got through, and this person said, oh, no, we've got no record of this having been sent to us. So I sent it again. And then didn't hear anything until I got a letter saying, you owe us $85. And so I rang and said, look, I've resent this a second time, and I don't think I'm hopeless with that stuff. And they said, well, no, we haven't got any record of it. So I sent it a third time. And then I didn't hear anything back, then I got a bill for $85. So I rang again, and there was a woman, she said, oh, well, look, let me look up your file. And so she looked it all up, because they had all your details there.
Oh, God, they do, Pam. They've got them all.
Photos of my car. And then she said, oh, yes, here it is. She said, oh, yes, we've got your email here. And she said, I'll tell you what, yes, we can see your photo. And so she said, oh, we'll send you a letter, but we can probably waive this. And then the day before Johnny's article came out, I got a letter saying they had waived it. So, but it was just such a big fuss, and there's sort of a facelessness about it. In Christchurch, if you get a ticket off the council, you can go into the council, you can talk to somebody, even if, they might not let you off, but you have a sense of, someone you can at least talk to about it. And so what amazed me today was that, Johnny writes this article every week, and, Gary and I think he's great, of course.
This is in the Press?
Yeah. So we're his parents, so we always read it, and our friends read it. But today our phone has not stopped ringing, and really sad stories. People who, someone was going to a funeral and they tried to write and explain, and in the end it was an older man, and he was just so distressed he paid the $85. Well, because there's no one you can go to. It's sort of this faceless organisation.
So you couldn't get an email through, and when you try to call, there are very prescribed hours in which there is somebody available. And in fact, and speaking from personal experience, I've tried to call and you wait and wait and wait and wait and wait and wait and wait.
Yeah.
And so what people are saying to you is they've had similar experiences?
Oh, yes. I guess in Christchurch here too, I mean, well, for a lot of us, the whole Wilson's thing, they've sprung up all over the city, and it's very sad, you know, because we lost all these buildings, and instead of the areas being greened or, you know, a nice piece of art being put there, all we get is Wilson's car parks. And you see a building coming down and you think, oh, well, tomorrow that'll be a Wilson's car park, and it is. And then they don't, you know, they don't seal the grounds or anything. They're muddy, they're stony, they're uneven. And so, like, if you're in a wheelchair or you were, you know, visually impaired, you'd have a real problem in their car parks. So, you know, and that, you know, it's just the sense of them leeching on the city that I feel.
Pam Sharp, who's just had a gutsful, like many of the people contacting us. It's some of the emails we're getting about Wilson's. Frankly, I'm surprised they're not melting the varnish off the table. Anyway, our producer, Bridget Burke, tried to contact Wilson Parking for comment, but it was after 3 p.m.
Thank you for calling Wilson Parking. For permanent parking inquiries, press 1. For account inquiries, press 2. If you're at a car park and require assistance, please press 3. For complaints, press 4. For casual parking and general inquiries, press 5. For parking enforcement inquiries, press 6.
Thank you for calling Parking Enforcement Services. Our office hours are Monday to Friday, 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. To lodge an appeal, all correspondence must be in writing. Please refer to the back of your breach notice on how to make an appeal or visit our website at esnz.co.nz. If you wish to make a payment, please refer to the back. If you would like to speak to one of our representatives, please call back during our office hours.
Welcome to Wilson Parking. You're speaking with Kate.
Oh, hi, Kate. It's Bridget from Radio New Zealand Checkpoint. How are you?
Hi, good.
Great. Is somebody there who's able to handle a media inquiry, please?
No, not in the office today.
I can't contact them on cell phone?
No, not today. They're all in meetings.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye.
Bridget Burke trying valiantly to get in touch with Wilson's Parking. We'd love an interview with Wilson's Parking. If you're listening, any time is fine. You just get in touch with us. We're Radio New Zealand here in Auckland. So much feedback is coming in tonight on the subject of water. John, when I first came to New Zealand in 1963, I did a lot of tramping and camping. I would have drunk water out of a lake or river then. I considered them all pristine. We are now living a lie, clean and green. Why are we accepting lower and lower standards of environment and education? We are New Zealand. Why don't we lead the world in unique high standards? Why always follow the downward spiral, says Graham. Sally in Dunedin says our standards of rivers and creeks is a scandal, not just the dairy farmers' fault. It's a crazy state of denial on the part of anyone who might be expected to take responsibility for maintaining standards. Everyone is ducking for cover. Can the minister hear how ridiculous he sounds? Are we all that gullible? Huh? Says Sally. That's a very fine Sally. And Vincent in Christchurch says, John, reforming, can we ask farmers why geofencing is not used for more herd management? The animals wear a GPS tag and get a small shock when they approach a no-go zone. They learn very fast where the boundaries are. No fencing needed. We did have the Parliamentary Commissioner for the Environment, Dr. Jan Wright, on earlier. That interview is now online, and she, of course, is interested not only in fencing along the waterways, but in the nitrates and phosphates and E. coli, the fecal content that goes down through the ground into groundwater and doesn't go directly into rivers, but seeps in over quite a long period of time. And the issue she addressed is intensification. In other words, there are many parts of New Zealand now that simply can't have more farm animals on them, and she said it is high time we face up to that. That interview is online. 45 seconds before 6 o'clock, after 6. The Minister of Justice, Amy Adams, says she'll review Section 162 of the Crimes Act following an appeal from a family whose son died 15 months after an assault. 9 Indian students will leave New Zealand this weekend after spending more than 8 months fighting deportation. And the Mount Albert by-election is tomorrow. Roughly 3,000 people have already voted. We give the 3 main candidates 60 seconds to sell themselves. That is after 6 o'clock. Mike Bush. Basically, every single person who's contacted us has said Mike Bush's 1983 drink driving offence is not material to his ability to be Peace Commissioner. Get over it. So, Mike Bush is being forgiven for his crime, his offence of 34 years ago. It's 6 o'clock.
RNZ News at 6. Ngā mihi nui, good evening. Ko Katrina Batanaho. The family of a man seriously assaulted in 2015 who died several weeks ago says it's unfair the man who hit him cannot be charged over his death. No one can be held criminally responsible if a death occurs more than a year and a day on from the offence. George Siolse, who was punched by Pilipesito Poai after a late-night argument in a Manukau street in September 2015. He was sentenced to a year's home detention in order to pay reparation for wounding with intent. George Siolse's mother, Sandra Gray, wants a law change.
That was the first thing I thought of after George's burial. So what happens now? Does he go back to court and under a different charge? I was told, no, it's a total insult to my son.
Sandra Gray. The Justice Minister, Amy Adams, says this issue has not been raised with her before, and she's asked officials to look at how the law is working. The Auckland Council wants a man whose bull mastiff viciously mauled his 4-year-old son's face to go to jail for at least 18 months. Orlando Shepherd appeared in the Manukau District Court today, where he was due to be sentenced, but that's been delayed until next week because he's been granted legal aid for a new lawyer. Shepherd has pleaded guilty to owning a dog causing serious injury after the attack in their Otahuhu home in 2014 left his son with serious head injuries. The dog was euthanized a week later. The council's prosecutor, Richard Merchant, told the court the council will be seeking a prison sentence starting at 18 months. He urged that sentencing to go ahead next week because the case is almost 3 years old, with Shepherd delaying it on purpose. A New Zealand man has appeared in a Brisbane court on charges related to an international paedophile ring. The 42-year-old was extradited yesterday. Elizabeth Brown reports.
The man, who can't be named for legal reasons, is facing 9 charges of indecent treatment of a child dating back several years. He was arrested last August as part of an international police operation launched in 1997. The police say he was identified on electronic devices belonging to a Cairns couple who were jailed for more than 30 years in America in 2013. They'd admitted buying their son as a newborn from Russia and abusing him, sharing images among members of a worldwide child sex ring. The police say the New Zealander also abused the child and took hundreds of photos. He did not apply for bail when he appeared in court today and is scheduled to appear again in a month. This is Elizabeth Brown.
The police commissioner says expectations around drink driving weren't as high when he was convicted 34 years ago, but they're rightfully high now. In a blog published today, Mike Bush says he was caught in Auckland in 1983 when he was a 23-year-old detective constable. He was off duty at the time. Mr. Bush says he was fined $250 and was disqualified from driving for 6 months for being fractionally over the limit. He says his drink driving conviction would have barred him from the police force if he had been caught post-1991.
I knew what I'd done wrong, but the more I reflect, the thing that concerns me is that I did something dangerous. You know, it wasn't a good thing then, it was wrong, and it's wrong now. And, I congratulate police and all of the partners that work in this space to have moved that culture.
The Police Commissioner, Mike Bush. In Britain, 6 men have been arrested after the discovery of a cannabis farm in a former Cold War nuclear bunker. The police say the crop is worth more than $1 million. Detective Inspector Paul Franklin says officers raided the site in Wiltshire in southwest England when they saw the doors opening after monitoring it for some time. He says the 20 rooms were packed with cannabis plants. The police also believe the bunker holds evidence of human trafficking. In his first comments on nuclear weapons since becoming president, Donald Trump says the US wants to expand its nuclear arsenal. He says a strategic arms limitation treaty with Russia, calling for both countries to have equal numbers of nuclear weapons, is a bad deal. The BBC's Nick Bryant reports.
As President-elect, Donald Trump said the United States must greatly strengthen and expand its nuclear capability. Let it be an arms race, he declared. But this is the first time he's called for an expanded atomic arsenal since entering office. In an interview with the Reuters news agency, he said the United States had fallen behind and that it should be at the top of the pack when it came to nuclear capabilities. Arms control groups have criticised the president's comments, saying that the United States and Russia already have far more weapons than is necessary to deter atomic attack from other nuclear-armed nations.
Nick Bryant in Washington. It's 6:05. To sport, and the Highlanders face the toughest possible start to the Super Rugby season, playing the 4 other New Zealand sides in consecutive weeks. Tonight they meet the Chiefs in Dunedin, a side they've beaten in their last 6 meetings. The Highlanders coach Tony Brown says the New Zealand derbies are notoriously hard on bodies, with an intensity and speed above that of the other games.
There's a lot more at stake and physicality's a lot higher, and obviously the fans realise that, and they're great games to watch and support. And we've got 4 games in a row against New Zealand teams, so it's going to be a pretty exciting 4 weeks for us and something that we're pretty keen to get into.
Tony Brown. The Black Caps enjoyed a big training session today as they prepare for tomorrow's 3rd ODI against South Africa in Wellington. The 5-game series is level at 1-1 after the Black Caps win in Christchurch on Wednesday. Coach Mike Hesson says beating arguably the world's best batting lineup has done wonders for his side's confidence.
I think they've got 4 or 5 guys in the top 10 in the world, and then all the other blokes can bat. So it's a tough gig. So that when you're able to beat the top side in the world, you've obviously played pretty well and at some key times, and we certainly did that.
Mike Hesson. The Wellington Phoenix have suspended Rolly Bonavaccia, Tom Doyle and Ryan Lowry for breaching team standards, but won't say what they did. And Claudio Ranieri has been sacked as Leicester City's manager just 9 months after they won the English Premiership. That's the news.
Tomorrow morning, Dame Georgina Mace on why traditional nature conservation has not worked and how natural capital could. Bikeability, a very successful cycle skills course in the UK. Could it work here? And Norman Earler on the drugs that fuelled the Third Reich. Join me, Kim Hill, tomorrow morning from 8 on RNZ National.
Met Service weather through to midnight tomorrow. Northland and Auckland, long fine spells, isolated showers until tonight and again tomorrow afternoon, mainly in Northland. Waikato to Wellington, also Coromandel Bay of plenty in the central high country. Fine apart from a few areas of cloud morning and evening. Gisborne to Wairarapa, also Bulla, Nelson and Marlborough, fine apart from cloudy periods about Bulla from tonight. Canterbury and Otago, sunny today apart from isolated afternoon showers inland. Scattered rain spreading north tomorrow afternoon and evening. Westland and Fiordland, cloudy periods, rain developing in Fiordland in the morning and a few showers about southwestland from tomorrow afternoon. Southland and Clutha, fine today, scattered rain tomorrow, clearing during the afternoon and evening. And the Chatham Islands mostly cloudy with a few early showers tomorrow. It's 6:08 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thank you very much indeed, Katrina. Really appreciate it. You've got a couple of weeks off.
I do.
Have a wonderful holiday.
I will, thank you.
Thank you. The Minister of Justice, Amy Adams, says she'll review Section 162 of the Crimes Act following an appeal from a family whose son died 15 months after an assault. George Siossi was punched multiple times in a serious assault by Pelepesete Poai as they left the nightclub in September 2015. The 37-year-old, who was working as a youth worker in South Auckland, fell down some stairs and hit his head violently on concrete at the bottom. Emergency surgery saved his life, but George suffered brain injury and later a stroke. He spent the next 15 months in and out of hospital and various forms of rehabilitation, but he died on January 4th. The man who hit him served 12 months home detention, but under Section 162 of the Crimes Act, no further charges could be laid for George's death because it came more than 1 year and 1 day after the incident. His mother, Sandra Gray, told me this is arbitrary and unfair, and they want a law change for her son, who fought for his life until the end.
He more than survived. He struggled. He fought all the time to stay with us. He fought for himself, for his friends, for his family, everyone. but his body just wore out. That's what I think.
So when did you lose George?
On the 4th of January.
And the assault was in September 2015.
That's right.
And under section 162 of the Crimes Act, after what period can you not be charged with causing someone's death?
1 year and 1 day.
So if George had died within 1 year and 1 day, his assailant would have been charged with some crime that involved causing George's death, potentially even manslaughter.
Yes, I believe so. I hope so.
But because 1 year and 1 day had elapsed, there was nothing.
Yeah, and it's a total insult to my son for those before him in the same situation. It's an insult.
Did anyone call to explain this to you? Did anyone call to explain that
No.
Boya couldn't be charged?
No. That was the first thing I thought of after George's burial. So what happens now? Does he go back to court and under a different charge? And I was told no, because there's a rule of 1 year and 1 day. I'd never heard of it before. Nobody had told me.
Where is George's assailant now? Where is Boya now?
I wouldn't have a clue. I don't know. Actually, during George's time, I've deliberately chosen not to let him occupy my mind. I never went to the court cases. I never looked at the newspaper, because to me he wasn't worth taking up space in my mind. And the time that he was in court, I'd rather be with my son.
What would you like to see happen as George's mum? What is the one thing you would like to see changed?
The 1 year, 1 day rule thrown out, preferably. If not amended, thrown out. I'm here to speak on my son's behalf. It's one of the last things I can do for him, and I need to do it. I need to speak for him. Not only him, but mainly him, but the people before and the people yet to come, the families, the victims. Yeah, that's why I'm here.
It's Sandra Gray talking to us earlier about her son George. We went to Amy Adams, the Minister of Justice, about this Section 162 in the Crimes Act, the provision that at 1 year and 1 day the ability to charge someone stops, and she said this is the first time anyone's raised it with her. She's asking officials to look at it, and she will consider some action depending on their response. We will get back to you on that. It's 6:12. You're with Checkpoint on Friday night. Some tremendous feedback coming on Wilson's car parking. I'm going to read it out. If you're from Wilson's car parking, do feel free to call us. And you can defend yourselves after we've read the feedback out. Residents of Christchurch Port Hills are being asked to conserve as much water as possible over the next week until the water levels in reservoirs are restored. There's increased pressure on the water supply because firefighters have been using waters from the reservoirs to put out the blaze, of course. Anne Kennett is one of many residents who was evacuated on Hoonhay Valley Road. Miss Kennett, who's just returned to her home, told our reporter Adriana Webber the fires came within metres of her house, with the heat melting her water pipes.
I thought that the fire had got to this area across here, so when we drove in and I saw it there, I was like, oh my God, I was somewhat freaked out, but only momentarily, because it's like, well, there's the fire, the house is still there.
And it is literally metres from your house.
It is, yes.
How lucky do you feel that it didn't take you home?
Extremely lucky, but it's the fire service that needs to be have with credit. I mean, we had this meeting yesterday, and they talked about what they did here, and it was just amazing. I mean, they just put all their effort into it, right along all of the houses in the valley, and just went at it for hours. And as you can see, they contained it in both sides of the. I think this one might have blown itself out, but they saved all the houses. The ones up the back that have gone, I think they got in too late. I think the fire came over, and there's just no way they were ever going to to save it. But it's apparently it was. It's all right. Oh, good, thank you. Our water pipes melted.
Your water pipes melted?
So we've just had to put, so we haven't had water for the last couple of days, so we've just been sorting all that out. But they're up just around the back through here, even closer to the fire than what we're standing. So yeah, we had a little bit of a water issue. But
has there been any other damage to your home?
No, we had no smoke and smell of smoke inside, and we had no ash. So amazing, given that it was so close. There's a little bit of, you can see there's embers have burnt through in the sail across the Sparvel, but that's it. And some burnt pine needles in the swimming pool and up and around here, but nothing. You wouldn't know around in the house that there'd been a fire so close.
That was Ann Kennett talking to Adriana Weber. Just a reminder, residents of Christchurch's Port Hills are being asked to conserve as much water as possible over the next week until the water levels in those reservoirs are restored. A group of students who are on the verge of being deported say they will continue to fight their case once they're back in India. 9 students will fly out over the coming days after spending more than 8 months fighting the decision. Laura Tupou met up with the students in Auckland today.
Gathered in their Auckland lawyers' boardroom today, the Indian students were finishing off some paperwork for a complaint to the Ombudsman. The students say they didn't know their India-based agents submitted fraudulent documents on their behalf. But after failed attempts to get the Associate Minister of Immigration, David Bennett, to intervene, they'll be returning home over the next couple of days. For Rahul Reddy, that means back to his parents' house, where the search for work will begin.
My friends are coming to pick me up. So they'll be picking me from the airport and then look for a job there now. Until at least for the result, we got to wait for the result of the Ombudsman. If that is in our favour, then we'll be happily coming back to New Zealand if it's in our favour. And otherwise, go back to India and find a job.
Mr. Reddy says he's still set on returning to New Zealand to gain work experience.
Because we spent our money here, it's not a small amount that we spent here, it's almost like $30,000 that we spent here for our education and for our work experience to gain. So without that, I cannot go back to my country and work there. I have to show them the experience of practical knowledge here.
Mr. Reddy's bags are packed and he'll be spending the weekend saying goodbye to friends, family and members of the Unitarian Church who supported the students' cause by providing sanctuary. Their lawyer, Alistair McClymont, says it's far from over. He's filing a complaint to the Ombudsman about how the students' characters were assessed, focusing on how the students weren't aware of what their agents had submitted on their behalf. Mr. McClymont is confident of a positive outcome.
And if it is, I intend to ask RNZ and the Ombudsman to go back and review up to 150 applications which have been declined by the same method.
Mr. McClymont says if successful, he will then seek to remove his client's deportation status so they can apply for a visa to return to New Zealand. He expects the decision will take a couple of months. The students returning to India plan to seek justice there as well. They're planning to push Indian police to press charges against their agents. The Indian Express newspaper is also starting to report on the students' cases. One student who's returning, Manoj Nara, says it's not a good look for New Zealand.
In India, New Zealand reputation is going down, frankly speaking, because everyone is saying that if the immigration is in the right position, they have to check before to entering to this country. After the student came here, spending his money in mid of the terms, no, we found this. Why these people are not finding before? They are asking us.
The students maintain that justice hasn't been served in their case and say they don't want any other international students coming to New Zealand to have to endure the same ordeal. Mō te hotaka o te ahiahi, ko Laura Tupou aho.
Thank you, Laura. Lots of feedback coming in on Wilson's car parking. Since the Christchurch earthquake, John, Wilson's car parks have been like a cockroach infestation of Christchurch. It's appalling that we have to pay to use their car parks, where many are fraught with ankle twisting and fall hazards, namely potholes, pools of water and large pieces of demolition debris. One has to consider wearing outdoor shoes when going out for dinner in the central city before changing into formal shoes. If car parking is to be at a Wilson's venue, they are an exploitative and bullying corporate enterprise. I think you should say what you really think. Wilson car parks are daylight robbery. Another example of private ownership stealing from the commons. Likewise, the water in our rivers. Cheers, Wendy. Well done on amalgamating two of the stories we've covered tonight. Wilson's in one word, parasites, says Paul. Who is Wilson's Parking, RC and Badger? Is there a Mr. Wilson? Is there a human owner? Is there a CEO who's ultimately responsible for this organisation, or is it just a computer worth investigating? Here we will. Best tip, says Sally from Dunedin, keep a bit of blue tack in the car for holding down tickets on windy days. Yes, because if they turn over, Wilson's will give you a ticket. And hi John, 3 p.m. Wilson's closed the door and cut the phone lines at 3 p.m. Someone's taking the piss right there. Pathetic. All the best, Tom. Thank you for your feedback and thank you for the marvellously unequivocal nature of it. Just what we need on a Friday night. 6:20 is the time. Mount Albert voters will go to the polls tomorrow, those who haven't voted in advance, and those who can be bothered to select a new MP to replace Labour's David Shearer in what's been dubbed the nicest by-election ever. National isn't even taking part, and the Labour and Green candidates are playing nice in a bid to demonstrate how their respective parties can work together after the general election. Voters do seem somewhat unexcited, so Checkpoint has given each of the three front-runners in the by-election an 11th hour chance to sum up their campaigns in just 1 minute. This is Labour's candidate, Jacinda Ardern.
During this by-election, I've had the chance to knock on a lot of local people's doors, and hands down the issue that's come up the most has been housing. 40% of people in Mount Albert are renting, and their costs just continue to increase, and many of them aspire to own. We do need to crack down on foreign buyers. We need to tax speculators, and we need to just get on with building affordable homes in Auckland. Those are all things we've campaigned on, and I know will make a difference to people here, and that matters. Next would be transport. We want to bring light rail from the city down Dominion Road and enhance some of those public transport services, which will help get the congestion off our roads and stop some of the local rat runs. And finally, schools. There are great schools in this area, but all of them are under pressure. They're growing. We need to make sure we're investing in infrastructure in our schools so we can keep those classroom sizes down.
That's Jacinda Ardern, Labour's candidate. The Greens candidate is Julianne Genter.
We have such an opportunity to create healthier, happier cities with better policy on transport and better urban planning. As our population grows, we need to ensure that we have affordable housing, but also that we're protecting the things we really love about Auckland, including green spaces and our waterways. As the Green Party candidate, and with over a decade of experience in transport and urban planning, I feel voting for me is a great opportunity to ensure that you have a strong advocate in Mount Albert for safer streets and a more people-friendly city. Whatever you do, definitely go out and vote. Democracy needs all voices. We need everyone's voice to be heard so that we can have the best outcome for our community and for the long term. And that's what the Green Party is standing for. We're a democratic global movement that's campaigning for action on climate change, reducing inequality, a smarter way of doing things, more friendly for the planet and for each other.
That from the Green Party candidate, Julianne Genter, and Jeff Simmons from the Opportunities Party had this to say.
So I grew up in the region, and as I've talked to people as part of this campaign, the real big issue that people are talking about is housing affordability and rents. And now I'm an economist, and I know that we are the only party with a realistic plan to restore housing affordability. Our tax reform package will stabilise prices and rents. It'll reduce income tax by up to a third. 80% of people will be better off, particularly renters, and we'll drive investment towards business so that we can grow income and jobs so that people can actually pay for the cost of the houses that they're currently trying to buy. I'm the only one that's prepared to work with the government of the day to get things done for Mount Albert. And another important point is that both the Labour and Green candidates are already in Parliament. So actually I'm the only one out of those three that's not in Parliament. A vote for me could mean that Mount Albert has three candidates for the price of one.
Jeff Simmons from the Opportunities Party. His point, of course, is that Julianne Genter and Jacinda Ardern are already in Parliament on the lists for Labour and the Greens, respectively. The by-election voting closes at 7 o'clock tomorrow night, and we will talk to the winner of that electorate on Checkpoint on Monday night. 6 men have been arrested in Wiltshire in southwest England after the discovery of a cannabis farm in a former nuclear bunker built during the Cold War. The police say the crop is worth more than £1 million. But there is evidence of something more sinister potentially. The BBC's John Campbell was given a tour of the site.
Behind the thick steel bomb-proof doors of RGHQ Chilmark, police showed us what they had uncovered. In huge rooms built to house politicians in the event of a nuclear war, thousands of cannabis plants. Some of them ankle deep in dried leaves. Behind the black tarpaulin in each doorway, you see the extent of this farm, in effect. In this room I've come into now, there must be about 200 cannabis plants in rows, in pots, heaters, lights, extractor fans. It's a professional operation, and this is just one of 20 rooms packed out with plants.
At a rough count, there's roughly 150 to 170 plants in this room alone.
Detective Inspector Paul Franklin from Wiltshire Police told me his officers raided the bunker overnight when they saw the doors opening after monitoring the site for some time.
Didn't know exactly what we'd find till we come in here, and it's bigger than even we expected, to be fair.
Some of the rooms contain mattresses and empty bowls of food. 6 men were arrested here, 3 of them on suspicion of human trafficking offences. Police say all of the cannabis plants found here will be destroyed.
That report from the BBC. Another 16 kapahaka teams have taken to the stage at the Te Matatini National Kapahaka Festival today. One of those groups, Te Rerenga Kotuku, is the first team from the Hawke's Bay iwi Ngāti Kahungunu to ever perform in the biannual competition. Amazing. And as Te Manu Kōrahi reporter Shannon Haunui Thompson explains, it was the final time for one of its members on the national stage.
On stage, Te Rerenga Kotuku welcomed everyone to their home. J.B. Smith, the kai tātaketane for Te Rerenga Kotuku, first performed in 1983 when the competition was last held in the Hawke's Bay.
We've been practicing long and hard like anybody else, and so we left everything on the stage. And especially, like you said, being the first team of Ngāti Kahungunu. So for us, I hope we've done them proud.
JB has been performing for over 30 years and says now the national competition has come home, it's time to hang up the pew-pew.
I stood in the last time we had the Kahungunu comps in 83. And so it's a special time for me too. This is my last. So I went from Kahungunu to Kahungunu so I can retire gracefully.
Why have you decided to retire?
Getting too old. Time to focus on my kids and my mokos.
More tai tangata rau a kapahaka from the Waikato Tainui area were very happy when they came off the stage. Their kai tātaketane Paraone Gloin says they not only performed to impress the judges but also to learn about themselves.
So you always want to come off stage and feel you've done your best. And I don't think anyone ever gives a perfect performance, otherwise we'd all be gods. Yeah. But I'm happy, and the items that I've taught have got the genealogies and the teachings in them that'll be with the members, whether they stay with the group or not. That's the point of the kaupapa of our kapahaka, is the perpetuation of the kōrero of Ngāti Raukawa. So I'm proud of everybody.
When the Prime Minister, Bill English, dropped into the festival today, he wasn't willing to say which group he liked the most, but he did know that many of the waiate and haka were about his team.
And as well, there's a whole lot of stories being told here. Some of them are aimed at the government, and a lot of them are about the history and the connections, and it's a window into what's best about New Zealand.
And he accepts the whittle that many groups are putting in front of him.
Oh, some of them I can, pick up enough words to know what's going on. And look, we're keen to pick up the challenges.
The third and final pool of 16 groups will perform tomorrow, and the top 9 groups who make it through to the finals will also be announced. The supreme title of Toa Whakaihu Waka will be awarded on Sunday. Mo te hōtaka o te ahiahi nei, ko Shannon Haunui Thompson ahau I here taunga.
Kia ora, Shannon. We end the program tonight with an email from Dave. Hi, John. Great show. Thank you, Dave. I'm watching your program live from St George's Hospital in Christchurch. I heard your interview with Mike Bush. As a serving police officer, he has my support 100%. 1983 was a long time ago. Thank you, Dave. And whatever has you in St George's Hospital, we hope you recover from it fast. Thank you all for listening. Have a wonderful weekend. We'll be back on Monday at 5.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. The family of a man seriously assaulted in 2015 who died several weeks ago says it's unfair the man who hit him cannot be charged over his death because of the length of time. The Auckland Council wants a man whose bull mastiff viciously mauled his 4-year-old son's face to go to jail for at least 18 months. A New Zealand man has appeared in a Brisbane court on charges related to an international paedophile ring. And the police commissioner says expectations around drink driving weren't as high when he was convicted 34 years ago, but they're rightfully higher now. Our next news and weather